Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. I got a good one for you guys tonight. I've got Todd with me, and Todd had a Class A encounter with Bigfoot when he was in the military back in 1993 in Oregon. They were out doing some stuff, and he drove by and saw three of these creatures standing out there, and it really changed his whole life and took him down this course where he spent the next 30 years researching this creature. And he's going to talk about some encounters he had later on some Indian reservations, strange vocalizations, going to get into some theories, things like that. This is a really good one, guys. You don't want to miss it. But this episode is sponsored by my very own coffee brand, Mysteries Unknown Coffee. You can check it out at mysteriesUnknownCoffee.com. But let's jump right into the story. Todd, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Really honored to have you here, man. I'm excited to get into this. I know you have had several encounters, and this has been something that's really affected your life. So take us back to 1993 when you were in the military service and had these encounters, and kind of walk us through that.
Absolutely. Just to preface things, born in the Pacific Northwest, you can't help but hear the stories. It's the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it. It just kind of permeates the culture out there. It's kind of Bigfoot ground zero, I guess, if you would. But I had always relegated this to, urban legend or rural legend, I guess, and, campfire stories, scare the kids, that whatnot. And so, having been an outdoorsman all my life, my dad would take us hiking and camping quite often. I was into fishing, hunting, mountain climbing, rock climbing, and all that stuff. And I never had the opportunity to see anything. But in hindsight, I guess I probably had my eyes a little bit closed due to my state of mind about the subject. But I don't know if you call me a non-believer or just agnostic. I really didn't care either way. But on April 3rd, 1993, I was a sergeant in the Army National Guard in Oregon. And as a combat engineer, we use a lot of explosives in what we do. Ammonium nitrate, C4, plastic explosives, dynamite, TNT, and all that good stuff. Anyway, on this particular day, we were going to do some pretty massive explosions and too big to do on the base there at Camp Paralyzing. So we would get permission to go up into the hills east of the coast of actually east of a little seaside resort called Seaside, actually, tourist place, and we're back quite a ways from civilization, if you will, because this was private timberland. They had rock quarries throughout their vast holdings, and we would use these rock quarries to do these, hundreds of pounds of explosives. Real time, real world is what we'd call it in the military. You want to train, you gotta train as you fight. So on this particular day, we had three rock quarries, gravel pits, if you will, that we were using. The first one we did cutting charges at with C4, cutting steel I-beams to simulate taking down a bridge, if you will. And second site was a mine breach operation where there was a minefield that we had to blast a lane through to get, our movement element through, or hypothetical movement element. The third and last site was a cratering charge. We used about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate. We'd been soaking in diesel fuel. So we're talking big booms, right? We're talking mushroom clouds that went 1,500, sometimes 2,000 feet in the air, and creating a temporary earthquake, if you will. Big booms. Anyway, so we had lit the fuse on this last cratering charge, got in our vehicles. I think there were 5 vehicles in all. I was a passenger in the second vehicle, which was a Humvee. And so while the driver and his alternate driver were up front, they're focusing on this winding logging road we were traversing to get to a safety area to wait for the explosion. And I had the liberty of not having to do that. I had the window down. It was actually a pretty nice day for April in the Coast Range, and so as a hunter in that area, and I lived in that area, I hunted both deer and elk in the Saddle Mountain unit, is what it was called. It was just natural for me to be looking for deer or elk or whatever. Um, and so we rounded this corner. I remember it was kind of a broad right hand sweeping corner. And as we left that side, we had some really tall trees, 70, 80 foot tall Douglas firs. We grow them big back there in Oregon. So there, we got to this point where they had recently cut a section of the forest. But or so it gave me a direct view once we got out of that tall timber. It gave me a direct view of that second blast site. And as it came into view, what struck me were these three dark figures. These three, they looked almost jet black, to be honest with you, standing right out in the middle of this rock quarry that we had just detonated. This, like I said, it was a mine breach maybe an hour or so just prior to that. And the first thing that came to my mind was, what are those people doing there, right? I mean, when we do this stuff, because obvious safety reasons, it's we have 100% integrity or 100% accountability. Everybody has to be within eyesight. We're not sending people off onesie, twosie, threesies. Everybody's got to be accounted for. It's just standard safety. So to see three individuals standing out there and technically probably within reach of possible debris from this impending explosion that was coming up, I was just in shock to see what I thought were people, and it took me about 2 seconds to realize what I was looking at weren't people at all. And by that I mean, well, there's a number of things, but just they were, just to paint a picture for your audience. We had three large figures all facing our convoy, which was descending this road across this ravine across from them at a considerable distance, to be honest. But so they're watching us. There's no question about that. They were just one, two, three, side by side facing us. The the profile, if you will, the dimensions, the ratios were off. The arms, for instance, they stretched well below the knees, not to the knees. I mean below the knees, where our hands obviously stop where our pockets are, because that's our natural place. I mean, they'd have to have pockets on their knees with these arms, and the legs too were just disproportionately way too long in just comparison to the torso for a human. The head sat squarely on the deck in that there was no real visible neck. And these things, mind you, are huge. I mean, they're built like bodybuilders. I'm not kidding. They were barrel chested, and there was a very discernible, uh, dis- distinct taper from that barrel chest down to the waist. And I mean, I'd love to have them on my football team for sure. And but the other thing that set them off, that made me write it off as being human, is the activity. The tallest one in the middle, that one I would say stood close to 9 feet tall. I'm not kidding you. Shoulders probably 4.5 feet wide. The two that flanked it on its left and right came up to its shoulders, but I would still say 7.5 feet tall. I mean, I could see them pretty clearly, and but it was the activity of the two on either side of the big one that really stood out. The one in the middle stood there like a statue, and it really didn't move hardly at all. But the two on either side of it exhibited this this swaying motion, this rocking side to side, left to right, they're like shifting their weight from one foot to the other. And in the process, these long pendulous arms are swinging below their knees. And they both were engaged in this, the two on either side of that larger one. And they did this the entire time I watched. I'm like, okay, people don't do that. But anyway, they did. When I say the entire time now, I watched them for at least, I would say, 25 seconds, which doesn't sound very long, but I mean, honestly, you look at your watch for 25 seconds and imagine us seeing what I'm looking at. It's an eternity, brother, and it's something I can close my eyes and right now and see it as if it were happening. You just can't unsee something like that. So anyway, I'm watching this activity. I'm looking at these things, whatever you want to call them, standing up on two legs facing our convoy, and 25 seconds passed, and we finally rounded the corner to the point where I lost sight of them, and I just kind of collapsed in my seat. I'm in shock. I'm literally traumatized by what isn't supposed to be, but yet I'm looking at it, and now it's gone, which is almost worse than seeing it, right? And the loss of the sight of them was almost as traumatizing as actually seeing them, uh, because it's like it's like, oh my god, it was there, now it's just gone, and it eats you up, and so anyway, it wasn't but just a few moments later that we arrived at this staging area I was talking about, where we were safely away from the explosion. And being in the second of five vehicles, as soon as we got down to that staging area, I had a little bit of time while the rest of the vehicles are coming in to I just instinctively jumped out and started jogging back in the direction we came from, and I obviously hoping to see get another view of them. Unfortunately, uh, again, with that 100% accountability rule, everybody has to be in eyesight. I went as far as I dared, maybe a couple hundred yards, and realized there was this dirt mound, this knoll, if you will, that was blocking my view. And I knew if I went another maybe 50 yards, I'd probably be able to see them, but I didn't dare because of the SOP. But while I was there on my tiptoes with my hand on my forehead, trying to look over this berm, so I heard somebody out to my right uh, call out my name. I heard somebody go, "Hey, niece!" And so I looked over and I see Sergeant Martin walking toward me, and I dropped my hand on my side. I go, "Yeah," and he goes, "What are you looking at?" And I said, "Nothing." And he continued to come up to me while the last few trucks rolled in behind us, and he was smoking on a cigarette, and he walked up to me and he looked me right in the eyes, and he goes, and I guess he probably gathered from what I was doing that this might be the case, but he said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." And of course, I'm like, because I thought I was the only one saw him, right? Because I know in my vehicle, the driver and the alternate driver were fixed their eyesight on the road, for obvious reasons, but I didn't know anybody else had seen him. I thought I was alone in this. And then he said, I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And he took a long drag off his cigarette. And I remember him looking to his left and to his right, making sure nobody else was within earshot. And then he looked right back at me and said, "I saw three dark, hair covered, huge, I don't know, Bigfoot, I guess." And, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm hearing this three, go, 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 go. I'm like, please say what I hope you're going to say. And he did. And of course, at that, I went, "Yeah, Jeff, I saw him too." And, it was cool. I mean, I was thrilled that somebody else shared that experience that I did. But that corroboration factor, although that was nice, it would never really change anything for me had I not had that. I mean, but it was, it was kind of cool, right? So at that time, I don't know if I mentioned before, I was in the National Guard. So traditional guardsmen train 1 week in the month, and then a couple weeks in the throughout the year, and but we all got day jobs and whatnot, and anyway, so it wouldn't be till early May the next month that it turns out we had two more soldiers come forward on their own, independent of each other, and admit to seeing what Sergeant Martin and I did. So it's a very as it turns out, and of course I didn't know at the time because I was not the least interested in even the consideration that these things might exist. But it turns out it was a pretty unique sighting. Not only, well, for several factors. One, multiple animal sightings, multiple uh, creatures are very rare, generally individuals. And then multiple eyewitnesses. And the very serious and sober activity we were involved in, we had four soldiers. And I always left to wonder if there were more. I've come to believe that maybe 1 out of 10 people that have these experiences actually go public with it, actually come forward with it for a number of reasons, but obviously the ridicule factor. People, you know, challenge your integrity, your honesty, or even your sanity, and a lot of people just it's not worth it to them. But I can't help but believe the four that came forward, myself included, were the only ones that saw them. But that's still cool. I mean, four soldiers doing a very serious exercise, and multiple animals. I mean, just the whole thing. I guess uh, became a very unusual, very unique sighting because of those factors. But I've been looking ever since, and it's been a crazy, crazy long journey, 31 plus years and counting. And I tell you, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've had so many very interesting encounters of other kinds throughout over 3 decades. I've met so many amazing people, and yourself included, and it's been fantastic. I got to ask why me sometimes, and look for a purpose in what I do, and why I do it, and I found that, I think, in the nonprofit organization I put together called the American Primate Conservancy, and the Conservancy's mission is the discovery, research, knowledge, recognition, and ultimate protection for this species. And a lot of people argue they don't need protecting. They're doing fine. They've been here longer than we have. They'll be here long enough to work on it. That's a great romantic notion, but without data to back it up, I'd rather err on the side of caution. And I want my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids to at least have, albeit a very rare opportunity, to have the same odds of seeing what I've seen. And if I can do something to help ensure that, I want to be a part of that. But anyway, so that's how I got into it, and it's, like I say, it's been a wild, wild ride ever since.
Well, first off, Todd, I want to say thank you for your service. I take that stuff very seriously, and man, I appreciate what you did for our country. I got a lot of respect for you guys and what you guys do. One of the questions I always ask people is, how did that impact your life? And obviously, this made a huge impact on your life. I know you spent the rest of that time from them, researching these things, and have had a lot of different experiences. But how long did it take you to come forward with that encounter and talk about it? And secondly, being in the military, was there any kind of situation where they tried to make you guys not talk about it, not come forward about it? I hear about that sometimes, but I'm really curious to see what your experience was with that.
define come forward, I guess. I mean, I talked to very few people, obviously very close friends and those involved directly, but it's kind of funny because you're not the first person to ask this. And uh, I was very, after I found out the next month that two other people had also shared that experience that Sergeant Martin and I had. I got a little bold. In the armory, in the hallways, there were a couple of bulletin boards where, the official postings and whatnot were put on there. And I think it was probably, I don't know, maybe the third month in probably June that I made up this flyer and kind of drew a little stick figure of a Bigfoot on there and just said, I can't remember. I bet I still got one laying around here, so I don't throw anything away. I'm a hoarder. Um, but yeah, I put up this little poster saying, anybody with information regarding a sighting during the April drill, contact me. Well, I put them up. I put one on two different bulletin boards in two different hallways, and let's just say they didn't make it to the end of the day. They were taken down. But yeah, I always wondered about that. I get it. It's official business, and we're supposed to be. I'm a non-commissioned officer, and but you're like, am I gonna get caught up on a Section 8? Uh, it's funny because that was 93 and I served until I finally retired in 2019. The word obviously got out. It became very public. Well, I became very public, so there was really not a whole lot. Yeah, I guess the genie was out of the bottle as far as the army was concerned, and we were way past that turning back point, and so it actually uh, they on a personal level. I mean, I dealt with officers, commissioned officers, and all kinds of warrants and non-coms and in private, everybody was pretty cool about it, and it's like, oh, I saw you on Unsolved Mysteries, or I seen you on this TV or that show or what have you, and yeah, that's pretty cool, and but there was no official. I take that back. I was working at the military department in my latter years, and this was down in Salem, Oregon. I worked at the military department for, I don't know, a couple of years, and in that military department was a public affairs office, and I had this major who was running the public affairs office actually approached me in private and seemed very sincerely interested in writing an article about my encounter. But of course, by this time it was pretty stale. But it really wasn't about what happened so much at that time, probably 20 years ago. But it was about the again, like what you're saying, how it affected me and what's happened since that time. But I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden the plug got pulled on that, and he really didn't want to talk about it anymore. But like again on the side, he was saying that's a pretty cool story. I think that'd make a nice human interest story for our monthly bulletin or whatever. But it never did come to fruition. But all in all, no, nobody harassed me. Nobody pulled me aside. There was no beatings, no floggings. There was no waterboarding over the whole thing. But I did take a big chance, and yeah, it all just kind of uh, was taken with a grain of salt, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you came forward with it, and these things do have a huge impact on your life. And you're right; it makes you wonder. And I think you're right with the odds. Maybe 1 out of every 10 do come forward with these encounters because I mean, people look at you like you're crazy. There's a stigma attached to it, and I'm trying to change some of that. And I know that's probably some of the work you do too, because a lot of people are sitting on these stories, and it makes you wonder, what all they see. I mean, you definitely were in the hot spot for these things. And did you ever see anything else in that area after that encounter, or were those the only sightings that you had during that time?
So encounters, as I'm sure you know, come in a variety of flavors. They can be vocal, they can be visual. Visual, is the kind of holy grail when it comes to encounters. But you can encounter a ton of different evidence that comes in many different forms, from, like I said, vocalizations, audible stuff. Not just vocalizations, but the tree knocks, activity, rocks and other objects being thrown in your direction from seemingly out of nowhere, trees being pushed down, even smell encounters, because these things do smell. I guarantee it. And I've only had one uh, instance during an investigation where I have no doubt I did smell one, and I'll check that block and get the T-shirt and never go back to that because it was not nice. Um, so they come in different, like I say. But in the case of Oregon, Pacific Northwest, I've had a lot of encounters like that. I've had trees pushed down around me. I've had the tree knocks, which are very distinguishable from an animal, a large animal stepping on a branch and snapping it, or gunshot. I mean, some of these tree knocks get very close to approximating gunshots. They're that loud, but it's wood on wood generally. But the throwing thing, I think uh, I haven't had a lot of experience with that, but I know a lot of people who have. And it seems to be, and if you ask me, I think that's their uh, throwing objects specifically for hunting. I think that's their weapon of choice, and it makes a lot of sense. You consider their strength. I think it's. I've heard stories of them lobbing rocks the size of bowling balls and weighing up to 20 pounds for over 100 yards with accuracy. You know,
Awfully.
but to get back to your question, in Oregon, 1993 was the only open visual sighting I had, but I have had other encounters in other states that, um in one case, and I'd never believed it unless I experienced it, because it happened over the course of 5 days, I should say, more to the point, 5 nights. Uh, and it seemed to be um, based on an established relationship. This was on a Indian reservation, and I had been communicating with some tribal members for over 3 years that to claim that they had established a relationship on the reservation, and in a very odd place for as far as I was concerned. But I took them up on their offer one time, and I think I'll go ahead and put it out there, was the Omaha reservation. Uh, the Omahas invited me out there, and I spent a week out there, and we went out in the field for 9 different evenings, and I I don't know how to say it, man. I mean, if somebody came up to you and said, "I'm going to show you Bigfoot tonight. You want to come along? You want to see Bigfoot? I'll go show you Bigfoot." I think you would react similar to what I would. I would be like, I might kind of patronize them and like, okay, well, I guess I got nothing to do tonight. Let's do that. Let's go. But if that same person came to you and said, how would you like to see Bigfoot tonight, tomorrow night? In fact, for the next 5 nights, more than one, might as well just throw that in there. Um, I would say, I'm sorry, but it doesn't happen like that. And uh, you have a good time and tell them hi for me. But I'm no.
A brief message from today's sponsor. It was a dark and stormy morning. My first case of the day. A real puzzler. My brain wasn't firing on all cylinders yet, but that's when it hit me. The smell of freshly brewed Mysteries Unknown coffee. Why is this coffee so stinking good? Was it magic? A secret ingredient? Or had I finally found the holy grail of caffeine? You want to solve this mystery for yourself? Head over to MysteriesUnknownCoffee.com. Ah, so stinking good. Now back to the episode.
I had my butt handed to me over the course of 5 nights. I can say I hate to say it because I I I had not put any credence into that kind of a possibility. But yeah, over the course of 5 nights, consecutive nights in two locations on the reservation, one 4.5 miles from the other, I have no question that I encountered multiple, um, two, sometimes three at a time, maybe four, I don't know, of of this species. I was taken to this location, and it was during COVID. And I only bring that up because the entire tribe, or most of the tribe, was locked down. They were quarantined in the main village, which was called Maze, and from like 7 in the morning. Well, excuse me, from about 9 o'clock in the evening until 7 in the morning, you could not leave the village. Um, we got an exception because of the position my uh, native uh, friend held in the tribal council. So we kind of got a pass. Well, we did get a pass. We got a pass every night for 5 nights. And um, anyway, I experienced this eye shine thing, and of course, my first go-to is I'm getting punked. This guy's got a remote control in his pocket, and he's got some LEDs out there, and they're gonna pull one over on the white man. But no, I mean, what I experienced were not stationary LEDs or anything like that. These things not only moved left, right, forward, back, every direction you can imagine, but these eyes blinked. The heads turned. Like I said, we had to have generally one or two at a time, sometimes three sets of eyes, all moving independent of each other. But it wasn't just the eye shine thing, which I have since figured out. I'm just going to put that out there. I did my research, and I think well, I know I figured it out, and we can get to that later if you want to. I don't know how much time we have, but it led me on an interesting path afterwards. But um, it wasn't just the eye shot; it was the vocalizations that accompanied this encounter. The guy would actually call them in. It was amazing. In his Omaha language, he would get out to this area, and just into the darkness, he would cup his hands to his mouth, and he would say, "Oh, Koge!" he would yell that out into the darkness, and sometimes he'd do it 2 or 3 times before he got a response, but eventually, boom! In the whole Kage means hello, friends, and it never failed. Never failed. It might take a minute, sometimes less, usually less, but it seemed like they responded to that. They reacted to it, and they came at because of his voice and the fact that apparently they did establish a relationship. Um, but the vocalizations, oh my God, I've heard probably more than most people have, but some of the vocalizations we got out there were phenomenal, just impossible for humans to replicate. But I remember that first night we got out there, Monday night. Um, we never went in, just so you know. We went in always around midnight, and we didn't leave until sometimes 2, almost 3 in the morning. Um, and then just out of exhaustion. And trust me, you don't know how hard it is to pull yourself away from watching what I would, sometimes watch for 2 hours and know what you're looking at. And these guys go, "Oh, time to go." It's like these things didn't like leave us. Oh, they're gone. Now we might as well go. They were there. It's like, give me a chair and I'll be here in the morning when you come back. I didn't want. It was really hard. It was hard to like. I'm like, I guess the only thing that they knew was that they'd be back the next day and the next day after that. I don't know, but for me, it was like, how can you walk away? But anyway, I was going to say maybe we were there. We got some eye shine. This is like 140, maybe 150 feet away. And again, they move. Sometimes they come closer, sometimes farther back. But there was this one. I can only assume it was a female, and by that, it's just because it was a really high pitch, louder than you can. Well, you've probably heard. I don't know, but what really loud, but from a seemed almost twice as far back into the wood line than the ones we were actually looking at. Maybe 300 feet, 400 feet. I don't know, but this very high pitched, 5 to 6 second long. I know this is going to sound weird, but I hear it. It was a song. That's about the closest I can approximate to describing what I heard. It was a beautiful song. By that, melody, chorus, whatever you want to call it, it changed in volume, in the notes, in the pitch, even in the rhythm, all within say 6 seconds, and then it would stop. I'm like, it wasn't scary at all. Not especially compared to some of the other vocalizations I've heard. But like 20 seconds later, she does it again. And just for the case of argument, I'm gonna call it she. She did again, and again, 6 seconds long, 5 to 6 seconds long. Again, absolutely pitch perfect, identical to the same verse, whatever you want to call it, that she had done just a few moments before. She did this a total of 4 times within probably a minute. I'm telling you, every time she did it, it was the same notes, the same rhythm, the same pitch, volume, everything. Which I don't know about you, but we're not talking some arbitrary screams, roars, howls, whoops, whatever that are usually associated with these things. When you have a vocalization that repeats itself time after time after time, I don't know about you, but to me that's a language, or at the very least, there is an embedded meaning in that. Otherwise, they wouldn't repeat it, and that's what really blew me away. And I'll tell you something else. I went day 3, which was a Wednesday. I knew we were going to go back out there at midnight, but I kind of snuck onto the reservation. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. I'm going to get kicked off the res for sure. but I went back during daytime because I figured out how to get there, right? I was driving the car. So I knew how to get there. And for me, again, just as a something pragmatic uh, uh, procedure, I needed to see that place that in the daylight. I wanted to make sure I wanted to investigate it, but I wanted to know, and this is without anybody else with me. Nobody knew I was there. I went out to this very same spot and I wanted to see what the background was. I literally couldn't see the hand in front of my face. Now I can see the whole thing. And I want to make sure there wasn't any possibility that there was some ambient lights in the background, maybe some street lights or lights from my house and stuff. I pretty much I already knew the answer to it, but I had to, for my own posterity, I had to eliminate that. And what I found was that there was a huge hill actually behind where they were standing that would eliminate any other uh, source of light in the background, which is what I assumed and what I was hoping I'd find. I'm actually trying to prove what I suspected, but I still had to do my due diligence to eliminate any other possibilities. And I actually didn't plan on going in the field, so when I flew over to Omaha City, uh, I didn't pack a lot of equipment, but one thing I did bring was a tape recorder, a little digital tape recorder. So I brought that with me, and I thought, you know what? We're coming back at midnight. This is like 2 in the afternoon. I hiked up to where I presume that they were standing the last nights before, and I planted that recorder, which could literally tape digitally for 72 hours. So I thought, I'm going to put that up there. I'm going to turn it on. And if when we come back, if they sound off again, I'm going to get it. That's all I could do, but I'm going to do it because I'm Todd Neese Bigfoot hunter. So it gets, so I hike up to where this ridge that I believe they were on, which turns out to be an old, an overgrown, abandoned, I'm assuming a logging road of some sort, impassable by cars anymore. The trees growing up out of it, but I think that's got to be where they were at. So I go to turn on my recorder, right, and I turn it on. The red light's on. I stick it between these at the crotch of this tree. I put some leaves over it to hide it. I'm like, I got this, and I just stand up, and guess who? This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now in my head, I'm rationalizing they got to sleep sometime, and if they're up with us at 2 in the morning, pretty confident they're probably sleeping right now. And no, wrong. This same individual, I'm absolutely positive. 2 o'clock. As soon as I stood up, I mean, after setting this tape recorder, I stand up and there she goes again. And this is 3 days later. She does that same song. This time for me, because obviously I assume she knew I was there. Otherwise, she probably it never would have happened. But she gave that song. She only did it once, one verse that time, but it was identical to what she did, 4 times a few nights earlier. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I've got it, I've got it. And then I'm thinking, mission accomplished already. I turn and I walking back to my rental car, and I got about, I don't know, it's probably not even 30 seconds later from the exact opposite angle. I hear this. 10 times louder than that, like two wooden baseball bats being hit together, rapid fire, just crack, 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 6 times. And now I'm like, I'm out of here. And again, I'm thinking I got that. Well, I'll just fast forward. I screwed up. I hadn't used this recorder in a while, and the first time you hit that button, the red light comes on. That's power on. You have to hit it a second time so it flashes, so you know it's recording. I missed all of it, all of it. So it's my mea culpa, my bad. But anyway, getting back to the original question, have I seen him since '93? Yes, uh, and in spades, but in a different state. And I have had some other instances since then that leads me to believe I've been in their presence or they in mine, whichever you want to say. But that really was kind of the pinnacle for me, and in more ways than one, because not only did it open my eyes to the idea of habitation or cohabitation, whatever you want to call it, which I had written off as screwball, couldn't be, no way. Multiple sightings, multiple animals, and literally night after night after night. It just was like, it was like drinking out of a fire hose. It was a lot more for me to really handle at once, but there it was, and it changed my life in terms of my research in this aspect. Is that after I figured out how that eye shine thing works, and it'll be in my book. We'll just leave it at that when it gets published, hopefully before the holidays. But it led me to ask myself, really question things I had questioned before. You know, uh, what other uh, uh, quote unquote paranormal um, effects or experiences that people have claimed to have happened? What other sort of phenomena can I possibly corroborate with science? And like I said, I've always been in that, matter of fact, flesh and blood camp. So I kind of rolled up my sleeves and I reached into the bucket of woo, if you will, and I pulled out the first tab, and it's like, oh, cloaking, invisibility, transdimensionalism, good one. Okay, where do we go from here? And so one of the things, and it was really fairly um, unexpected for me, but I was in my truck, and then this country song came on. It had a good beat, and I liked it, and I've got a nice stereo in my truck, and I cranked it up max volume, and I'm digging this whole thing. It's got a great subwoofer in there, and I got to change lanes. So to my right, and I look in my rearview mirror, but problem is the vibration, the vibration from the sonic bass subwoofer is blurring out my vision. It's distorting my view of the traffic in the next lane, and I realized, wait a minute, I got to turn. I've literally got to turn down my stereo so I can make sure I'm nobody in my lane. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm thinking, wait a minute, sonic waves can distort vision, even in the case of solid objects. That kind of opened the door toward me looking more into the infrasound aspects. And infrasound, for those that don't know, there's sounds that are 20 kilohertz that is below human hearing. So you think of the deepest bass you've ever heard, as loud as, I mean, like volume 10. I don't care if it's 100 decibels. Now consider there is sound that exists below human hearing that is not only uh, powerful, it's very physical, but it also carries with it some amazing effects that affect not only humans but other animals as well. And so as I started going down that rabbit hole and doing my research into infrasound, and one of my first go-tos, other than the I'm being punked rule, is if somebody says these things are capable of doing something that seems, to put it in a nice way, unique, uh, I my first go-to is, all right, show me one other species of any kind that can, whatever you claim it can do, shoot flames out its butt or whatever. Show me one other creature, one other species that we know of that has this characteristic, this can do this phenomena that you claim, and then we will have a base, a point to start from, and okay, we can talk. But if you're just going to claim they can do something that no other species can do, have a nice day. Well, so I look into infrasound and find out that not only do whales do it, elephants do it, tigers do it, hippopotamus, rhino. Alligators. I can rattle off a list of animals that can generate. And again, these are things that 100 years ago we didn't even know about infrasound, so nobody even considered it. But guess what? We've been affected by it. We've observed it in some cases and never, connected the dots that this actually being generated by known species. Interestingly enough, large mammals. Well, that kind of fits our subject, does it not? Right. So this experience, and it's really only gone back in the last 4 or 5 months, has opened a door for me that when it comes to infrasound, I can again, I'm a little leery about coming out with details. I'm sure people can do their work, but I just only want to get credit, not for the research that I unburied, some of it going back 60, 70 years, or it's been out there, but connecting the dots in regards to how it applies to Bigfoot and some of the phenomena people are experiencing. I'd like to get that credit, but I'm going to say I've been able to explain, aside from the eye shine, which has nothing to do with infrasound, I've been able to explain why people claim that I was looking at a Bigfoot and suddenly it just vanished, or I was looking in this direction, there was nothing there, and suddenly this Bigfoot appeared out of nowhere. Well, I'm going to tell you something, brother. That's infrasound, and they are generating it. And if you think uh, frequencies, sonic waves can rattle a mirror and create distortion. Imagine what it can do with liquid. Imagine what you do when you put a bowl of water on top of a subwoofer and crank your stereo up to 10. It looks like the water's boiling. There is force there. There's energy there. It's very physical. If they can generate this like we know other mammals can do, they can very well use it to make it appear as though, well, basically blur your vision should they want to, and make it appear that, well, make them disappear, if you will. And if perhaps they feel less threatened by your presence, they may lower the volume, so to speak, and it may seem like they all of a sudden just appeared out of nowhere. They're not changing their frequency. The fact of the matter is they're changing yours. Okay. And then we can extrapolate that onto why we get all these blurry photos and videos. Well, there you go. If it can affect a solid object like my mirror, it can affect camera lenses, it can affect game cameras, it can affect cell phone cameras. If they're generating it at the time, that's why we might not be getting clear pictures being zapped. Hey, tigers use infrasound to stun herds of antelope and gazelle and whatnot, because even bass that we can hear, mind you, but certainly in the case of anything below 20 20 kilohertz, um, is omnidirectional. Uh, People talk about being zapped, being paralyzed with fear. I've had it actually happen to me in 1998 on an expedition I was with Peter Byrne and Ron Moorhead, not far from where I had my 90s resighting. They were not in the area with me. I was in placing these seismic ground sensors, and I got roared at by one at very close range. And what's interesting is that there are portions of their vocal range that are within our hearing range. It doesn't mean that when you hear that roar, there is not a harmonic, a lower harmonic, or a higher harmonic for that matter, that we can't detect. We're hearing what we're hearing of that vocalization is only what is within our ability to detect. But I can tell you when that happened, I couldn't move. I could not move for 2 minutes. And I've had rockets and mortars and bullets fired at me in combat. I'm going to tell you, I've never ever reached that level of fear, nor do I ever want to feel that way again.
I don't blame you, man. Like that's you hear a lot about people having these encounters where these creatures screaming them like that, and they talk about it just moving their whole chest, And I've never heard that theory before, and that's a very interesting theory. And it's one of the things about this show I love is to hear everybody's thoughts and opinions. And man, that is really interesting to me. And I could see how that could affect a lot of different things. I mean, growing up, man, I had a bass system in my vehicle like most of us do, and man, it definitely would rattle everything, and it does make it hard to see. So that's a pretty interesting thought process, man. And it's funny how the human brain works, where a lot of times we have to be in that situation before something clicks. But man, going back to the encounter on the reservation, when you heard these vocalizations and you saw these eyes and stuff, was it anything like samurai chatter at all? I know that one, the female, had that vocalization where it sounded like a song, which is really incredible. I've not really ever heard of that before, so I appreciate you sharing that with me. But was anything like that at all?
So the sounds that we heard that over the course of those 5 evenings, they did change. The vocalizations were different. I don't recall any of the anything that really approached the samurai chatter, but they were very distinct in between individuals, and one in particular um, really got me was what one of the things I didn't know was that the Mormons had been uh, preaching to a lot of the reservations, a lot of different tribes in that area, and my friend had actually converted to LDS religion, and was very religious and very respectful, respectfully so, and the only reason I bring that up is I want to say it was the third night we were there, Wednesday night. Again after midnight, we got out there and there was some activity going on. He'd call out "Oh Kage," and they would show, but there wasn't quite as much activity as we had seen the prior 2 nights. And so my host, my native friend, says, says, I'm going to try something I haven't done in quite a while, but sometimes it seems to get their attention. Sometimes, maybe we can get some more activity. He says, I'm going to pray with them. I'm going to pray for them and with them, and so bear with me here, and I'll give it a try. Sometimes I get a response. So again, it's "Oh Kage." He says, I want to, and keep in mind this is during COVID. He says, I want to speak to our Creator, uh, and pray with you, pray for you. for your health in this time, and for your happiness and safety in this time. So feel free to gigaho, which means come closer. Gigaho, join me as I speak to the Creator. And so, what do? You bow your head, and I'm like, okay, I'm along for this ride. We'll see what. So he goes into about a 3 minute prayer, right? So um, about halfway through, maybe 90 seconds into it, we get this vocalization from very, very close range that more along the lines of the classical whoop sound that we hear about so often. But this was really loud and was very close. I estimated less than 50 feet away that one of these closed in, and of course we can't see them. Like I said, I can't even see my friend next to me. But this thing moved in, and we heard this like 4 times. I'd lose my voice trying to even try to replicate it, but really loud, very low crescendoing, loud, I guess, whoop kind of thing like that. Really loud, and I could tell. It's all I could do not to look up, because we're supposed to be praying. I'm like, got my head, but I can tell it's over here about my 2 o'clock and maybe 50, 60 feet away. And he just keeps going. My friend, he did not let this slow him down. He just continues his prayer for maybe another 90 seconds or so. And he finally says, Amen. And I'm looking up and I'm like hoping something's not right. And I mean, right in front of me. But anyway, of course, first thing I say to him is that what I think it was? He goes, oh, yeah, that was them. He's like, they're right over there, right? And I went, yeah. I said, that was close. And he goes, yeah. He said, I think I know that one. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, oh, that's the one gets close. Has been the one that's gotten the closest to me of all of them. I call him Michael Jackson. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, I call him that because one night it was just after sunset. It was, you know, dusk, still some uh, daylight, but not much. And this one had approached him and started into this rocking thing, like kind of like what I had seen, I guess, but a little more animated, I guess. It was going back and forth like this, swinging its arms, and he could see it. He could actually see it at that time, and he said it reminded him of Michael Jackson just because of these moves. And what's interesting too is he said that it was more like a demonstration of sorts, and a female had this presumed maybe his mate or whatever came up behind him. According to my friend, her hand on its shoulder, which kind of chilled him a little bit, and then walked around it, and then sat down and leaned back into the chest of Michael Jackson, I guess, and just chilled him right out. Just like, calm down, calm down. Just kind of rolled back into it. But anyway, I thought that was funny that he said, oh, I think I know that one. It was absolutely different. And there were other sounds that we heard as well. But those two I remember very distinctly.
Man, what a unique encounter, Todd. It blows my mind that, I've not been doing this very long, not near as long as you've been in this world, but you hear about something different almost all the time, man. And it's such a wild world. And, the only thing I know is, man, there's just a lot in God's universe that we do not understand. As a believer, man, that's the only thing I know to do with it is to put in that category. there are no experts, in my opinion. We're just taking really good, educated guesses and trying to figure this stuff out, man. And I think me and you could sit and talk for days because you have so much to share, and we probably should have you back on. And there's a lot of questions that I have that we could dive into if we had the time to do it. Because man, what a wild 30 something years you've had in this world, man. And I appreciate you taking the time to share that. One more question, if you've got a second that you could go into. And I noticed you said that you smelled one of these creatures one time and it was not a good experience and you don't want to go back there. I kind of have this theory that they have the ability to turn these smells on and off. I don't know why that is. And I could be wrong, but that's just my thoughts. But why don't you briefly talk about that if you're open to it? I'd love to hear about it. And we definitely have to have you back on, man, to get back into some more of this other stuff.
Oh, I'd be honored. Hey, we're practically neighbors. Hopefully we'll get to meet each other in person someday. But
Definitely.
no, to answer your question, I agree with you. I think this is this ability to admit this odor, I guess, for lack of a better word, is just one other it's a weapon in their arsenal, along with the infrasound we spoke of. Um, these are fascinating animals, and in this particular case, I was called uh, by an individual who had an encounter up this river known as Roaring River. It's a tributary to the Clackamas River drainage, which is not real far from where my home is in Oregon. Um, this guy was a rock hound, an amateur rock hound. He had a another normal life, but he'd like to rock hound, and he knew of this place about a mile upstream from the mouth of this moderate sized river that came out of the mountains, where there was a lava flow that crossed the river at one point, and in the summer when the water level drops down enough, it exposes a good portion of this lava. In it is embedded what he called common opal. And he would go in there, hike in there. It's not an easy hike. There's no established trail. Um, but he would go in there with his dog and bring his hammer and chisel and his little collection bag and hike in there. And like I say, in the summer when the water levels dropped, he would chisel out this samples, these chunks of common opal. And I assume either, probably made jewelry out of it. I don't know. Opal's pretty unique in that regard. And so he was down there, down right along the river. He'd let his dog, which was a Australian Shepherd, full grown Australian Shepherd, just kind of wander. And while he was working away, now picture in your mind metal hammer, metal chisel. And imagine how unique of a sound that is a mile into the woods from anywhere. Tink, tink, tink. I think you get where I'm going with this. It attracted some attention. His dog was growling. It wasn't barking, but it was growling in a very vicious, menacing way at something. Now he's down on the river. The dog's probably 10 feet higher than he is. He can't see what the dog's growling at, but this dog just is growling incessantly. He figured at first out, so a raccoon, a squirrel, whatever, porcupine, whatever, and kind of wrote it off. But it just didn't. It just went on and on and on. And finally, he decided to investigate. So he set down his hammer and chisel and walked up to where the dog was. He looks in the direction the dog's looking, and he never said. This was one of the kind of cool thing about this report, this investigation. He never used the word Bigfoot. He said, "I'm looking at a gorilla," and that's exactly how he worded it. He says, "There was a gorilla standing up on two legs, looking at my dog, and they were both kind of growling at each other. And as soon as he saw this, he pushed the dog off. It was kind of had its nails embedded in this log, pushed the dog off and ran for everything he could. And what took him 45 minutes to get in took him about 20 to get out. And a very, very rough go, because we got there about 2 weeks later. We, investigating friend of a partner of mine, met him and went in there. We retraced the route he took, and it was a good mile in there. We got to this. We took the same route he took, and it's so dense, and there's almost really only one way to go in and out. We investigated the site, and sure enough, when we got there, here was his hammer and his chisel and his collection bag full of opals still laying on the bank down by the river, which kind of was corroborating. And he showed us where the dog was and where this quote unquote gorilla was. We measured it at 47 feet, not very far, 47 feet away from him and this gorilla. Excuse me. We took pictures. We looked around for extremely hard and difficult to take any tracks. So within about 20 minutes, we collected our stuff and whatever data we had, and we turned around and walked out. Now, what's interesting is on the way back out, taking the very same route, we walked past this kind of a rock wall on one side. The path we took went right along the base of this cliff. And we walked into what I can only describe as a wall, a very heavily concentrated wall of smell, which was putrid, rancid, any adjective you can come up with times 10, worse than a skunk. Almost made you want to vomit. But it sure the hell made you want to get away from it. We'll put it that way. But it was the physics of this field of smell that I still can't understand, and I'll have to put that on my list. But if somebody runs over a skunk, and we got a few of those around here, you smell it like an eighth of a mile away before you even get to it, and then you want to roll the windows down after you pass it just to get the smell out of there, and it takes an eighth of a mile for you to clear the air. That's a skunk. This was stronger than the smell of a skunk, and I'm telling you, it like the worst roadkill on a hot summer day that you walk up on. It just horrible. But the weird thing was, when you walked into that field of smell where you can smell it, you could take 10 steps backwards and be out of it and not smell it at all. Now, I don't know how that works. I'm not even going to pretend to know how it works, but you could literally walk right back into it and go 30, 40 feet and walk out of it. You'd come out the other side of it. It was that concentrated and that localized. I don't get it, because you would think something that is that putrid, that pungent, that rank, that was easily on par with a skunk, worse than a skunk. But unlike a skunk, you had to be, you could literally walk in and out of it. This is what's really interesting. We had walked that path not even 20, 25 minutes before that. We were on our way back out retracing our same route, and it wasn't there when we came in.
Man, that stuff leaves you scratching your head, Todd. I don't know what we're supposed to do with that kind of stuff, man. The only answer I have is to chalk it up to we don't understand all these things in God's universe. And you know, every time I do one of these episodes, I learn something new. I try to just sit here and learn as much as I can. And man, at the end of the day, all we can do is talk about our opinions and you know, take educated guesses, but it's always very interesting to me. And I appreciate you taking the time to, you know, to come on here and share those experiences. We got to have you back on. There's a lot we didn't even get to get into, and I think we just scratched the surface, and we'll get you back on here, man, and dive into that a little bit more. But I'll drop the link to your organization below, and I appreciate you being here, man, and keep in touch, and we'll get you back on really soon. Guys, thanks for hanging out with me and Todd tonight. I know that was a really unique podcast. There's a lot of answers that hopefully we can get for you guys. There's a lot of questions that I walked away with that we didn't get a chance to get into, and hopefully we can do that really, really soon. I love learning this stuff and love having people on here, but I love the fact that you guys hang out with me and that you guys are here for part of it. Couldn't do the podcast without you. I really appreciate all the support, and I'm just glad you guys are here. And, you know, I'm very, very honored to be able to do this. Guys, you know what I'm going to say. I can't get off here without saying it. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.